a real apocalypse in Donetsk. Once a flourishing city, it has now turned into a real dump. Bags of feces are lying everywhere. Something unknown is coming out of the tap, and how all this will end is still unclear. Hello, my name is Anastasiia Husarieva. Now I'll tell you how life is in temporarily occupied Donetsk, why people are dying en masse there, and what the occupation authorities are saying. So while you're liking this stream, subscribing to our channel, and leaving your comments, I'll tell you everything in detail. Donetsk was once called the city of a million roses. It was a source of pride for every local resident. Along the roads, near factories, and even in the courtyards, hundreds of thousands of red, pink, and white rose bushes bloomed. Despite its heavy industry, the city had a reputation for being clean, tidy, and well kept. When someone mentioned Donetsk, people immediately thought of football and immediately thought of flowers. Now that's just a memory. The city that once took pride in its green streets is now suffocating from dust, stench, and a lack of the most basic thing, water. A country that once built industrial giants can no longer provide its people with even a glass of that same clean water. Today, Donetsk is literally dying of thirst. The taps are empty. When water does appear, its color is gray or even rusty. The smell of this water is literally unbearable. People stand in line at water trucks for 4 or 5 hours just to get at least some murky, technical water. The water is not suitable for drinking, but there is no other option. Residents of Donetsk live in such conditions that they are forced to do absurd things. In the city, bags of feces are being thrown out of the windows of apartment buildings. Just look at this image. And this is reality. This is no longer a joke. This is reality. Donetsk, which was once called the City of Roses, has now become a city of stench and survival. In the occupied part of Donetsk region, water stopped being just a convenience a long time ago. It has become a real treasure that people are forced to fight for every day. According to official data, at least 109 people in Donetsk have already died due to lack of water, unsanitary conditions, and diseases that spread along with them. Moreover, the water itself is dangerous. Russian propagandist, the so-called war correspondent Dmitry Stashin, almost lost his eyesight. The underlying cause was the water in occupied Donetsk. Amoebas were found in his Makiivka district, which gradually eat away at a person's eyes. This disease is called acanthamoebic keratitis. He could have contracted the infection in Donetsk. Stashin washed his face with water that he had specifically left in a warm place to heat up, and because of this, bacteria could have multiplied there. And in the end, what happened. Why did Donetsk end up without water? The root of the problem is the destruction of the Siverskyi Donets canal, which for decades supplied almost the entire Donetsk region with water. It was specifically Russian troops in 2022 and 2023 who shelled the pumping stations, dams, and the entire infrastructure of the canal. When this canal stopped operating, Donetsk was essentially left without its main source of water. The occupation authorities of the so-called DPR and their Russian overseers occasionally promised to replace hundreds of kilometers of old pipes. But such promises have been made more than once and have brought no results whatsoever. Back in 2013 to 2014, Moscow promised to restore the canal, and Russian companies received billion-dollar contracts to reconstruct the Donbas water supply system. However, the work never began. The money disappeared, and so did the documentation. There was no real progress. And only in August 2025 did the leader of the so-called DNR, Pushilin, officially admit that the water supply was in a catastrophic state. 11 years after the funds were allocated, this admission comes far too late. People have already been surviving for months without proper water, forced to use technical and murky liquid from barrels and quarries, while the entire management system is essentially broken.
That's how we live. We have to fetch it. What else can we do?
What can we do? Asked the residents of Donetsk, and not only them. Some people collect water from puddles, from mine drains, or from old quarries, like here, for example.
We live by scooping water from a puddle. Luba. Can you believe it? My neighbor. The grandmother is 83 years old. How can you live, huh? How can you live without water, huh? How can you live?
How can you live without water? That's the question residents who unfortunately remain in the occupied territories keep asking each other. Well, and these questions perhaps should be addressed to the occupation authorities, because all of this is the result not only of the war started by Russia, but also of years of corruption, negligence, and promises that were never fulfilled. And as a result, the water crisis in the occupied territory of Donetsk region could lead to the resignation of that very Pushilin, who has headed the occupation administration since 2018. And in 2022, he was approved by Russia as the head of the so-called DPR. Talks about his removal have been circulating for a long time, but now they have intensified. An imitation of reconstruction, when the situation became truly critical, Moscow decided to make a demonstrative gesture. An official from the Russian Ministry of Construction arrived in Donetsk. Together with Pushilin, they held a working meeting on restoring infrastructure and stabilizing the water supply. On Russian television, everything looked grandiose: maps, charts, promises, and inspired statements about caring for people. But everyone who lives there knows it's just an imitation. In reality, it's not about reconstruction, but about another round of dividing up the money. Moscow is trying to show that it is supposedly helping Donbas, although in reality it is simply shifting its control over the territory. The occupation authorities have once again promised to replace more than 570 kilometers of water supply networks. But these promises are nothing new. Not once have they been fulfilled. The wear and tear of pipes in Donetsk has reached 100%. In some areas, the water simply leaks into the ground. To avoid responsibility, Russia shifts the burden of restoration onto its donor regions, provinces that are now forced to finance the occupied territories. In fact, the Kremlin is patching up the holes caused by its own war with other people's money. To show at least some results and create the illusion of caring for the occupied territories, the Kremlin has heavily promoted the large-scale Donbas water pipeline project. On paper, it was supposed to be a lifeline for the entire region, a backup canal that would ensure a stable water supply. The plan looked ambitious: 4 separate pipeline lines that were meant to cover almost the entire region. But, as is often the case with Russian mega projects, it all ended up being nothing more than a show. In reality, only one line was built, and even that with numerous violations and accidents, as well as pressure losses in the system. Even at its best, this water pipeline provides less than 30% of Donbas's needs. The rest of the area is left with dry taps, lines of water trucks, and canisters in stairwells.
Water was successfully delivered to the care home located in the village of Lidivka, which, as a result, made the local residents feel extremely happy and grateful. Yes. Drinking water, clean.
It was absolutely delivered for free to my address.
So, well, every day there are more and more people getting involved in helping to overcome this water blockade. Entrepreneurs and just
Grandpas and grandmas, many in the village, can't even go out to fill up a bottle of water.
and dedicated volunteers come with large water tanks, arriving on sturdy gazelle trucks equipped with powerful pumps.
That's the first time I'm hearing this from you. Also, the cost of construction was measured in billions of rubles, but there are no results. The money disappeared among contractors, supervisors, companies, and officials. The so-called Lifeline water pipeline became yet another corruption scandal where water remained only in official reports, not in people's taps. On the map of Donbas, there are now dozens of cities drying up where the word water sounds like a dream. In Kartsysk, there has been no water for the 3rd month. The Olkivska reservoir, the city's main water source, is critically drying up. In Donetsk region, out of the 10 largest reservoirs, 9 have almost dried up over 3.5 years of war. The Starokrimsk reservoir has nearly dried out, with only 15% of its water remaining. Now the authorities are trying to pump water from the Makiivka quarry to the Krinka and Kanzhenkivske reservoirs. But locals are asking a simple question. Why didn't the rivers dry up before, and why were the quarries full of water? Without restoring the supply from the Siverskyi Donets, Donetsk is doomed. Sometimes it seems like the situation is improving a little. The Kanzhenkivske reservoir, which almost dried up in the summer, has started to fill up again. Perhaps it's because of heavy rains, or maybe due to water being diverted from the Makiivka quarry. Locals say that both factors had an effect at the same time, but this is only a temporary relief. There is still not enough water, and people are being accused of allegedly draining water from the heating systems, which causes the pressure in the system to drop. The quarry itself, once a favorite spot for recreation, has now turned into an almost dried up pit. The water there is murky, reeks of rust, and you can even see buses on the bottom that were previously submerged. Despite this, people go there with bottles and canisters, trying to collect at least a little moisture from the dirty bottom because there simply is no other source. In Makiivka, people stand in line for water for several hours because it is delivered only once every 4 days, 1 barrel for the entire district. The lines stretch for several streets. People argue and even take turns at night.
This is what the central city district of Makiivka looks like. People are collecting water. The water goes everywhere, just not where it's needed. This is how people collect water. It's just unbelievable. The water is running down the asphalt.
You can see for yourself, they're literally scooping water from puddles. So let's continue talking. Today, Mariupol is a city where water is brought all the way from St. Petersburg. It sounds absurd, but that's the reality. There are more than 1,500 kilometers between these cities. And instead of restoring the local water supply, the Russian authorities decided to transport water across half the country. This fact has become a symbol of the utter absurdity and helplessness of the occupation authorities and their system. A city that just a few years ago stood on the shore of the Sea of Azov is now suffocating from thirst. There are almost no functioning toilets or car washes in Mariupol. They are simply closed due to the lack of water. Many cafes, schools, and kindergartens are not operating because they don't even have the conditions for basic hygiene. The sewage system is at a standstill, it stinks in the streets, and people are getting used to the idea that cleanliness is now a luxury. Water is turned on only once every 3 days, and even then just for a few hours. During this short time, people have to do everything: fill up tanks, wash themselves, do laundry, and cook food. People stand by the taps making the most of every minute because the water can disappear at any moment. The pressure in the system drops so quickly that sometimes water simply doesn't reach the upper floors, and residents have to carry it up in buckets from below. To make matters even worse, the Kalchik and Kalmius rivers around Mariupol are visibly drying up. But for now, local residents still bathe there. If the occupation authorities connect the Pavlopil and Starokrimske reservoirs, the Kalmius River could disappear completely, turning into a dry riverbed. This threatens an even greater catastrophe, since these rivers were one of the natural reservoirs for local needs. These few hours of water have turned into a real celebration for the people of Mariupol. But even this luxury is not available to everyone. In remote areas, water is not supplied at all, and people are forced to make do with what is left. Mariupol residents risk their health by using murky and technical water, which is often unsuitable for cooking or hygiene. And even when water does appear, it is absolutely unsafe to use.
Mariupol. Hot water. Coca-Cola is nervously smoking. I'm in shock. We pay for this water. Well, here's the water. How can you even bathe in this?
You can see for yourself what kind of water comes out of the taps. It stinks, leaves residue, and ruins the plumbing. People complain that after washing, they get itching and rashes. It's not used for cooking. Boiling it doesn't help. And despite this, the occupation authorities raised water tariffs starting July 25th. People are paying more for the poison that flows from their taps.
Dennis Pushilin. We live in the DNR. Here's your favorite water, as they call it, that comes out of our tap. When you come, will you try it? I haven't paid and I won't pay for water. Come and cut it off. Go ahead.
It's horrible. Moreover, the so-called occupation authorities of the DNR are cutting off water to abandoned homes under the pretext of fighting illegal connections to the system. Since the beginning of August, 170 subscribers have been disconnected from the water supply, including 48 for unauthorized connections and 122 supposedly abandoned houses that have no owners. Censorship and the fear of local residents are recording everything on video. For example, you can see one of them on your screens right now. They posted on social media begging for help. Children are recording appeals to Putin. Locals don't know how to describe everything that's happening so that it doesn't sound less frightening than it really is. To prevent the truth about the real scale of the disasters from leaking out, the occupation authorities quickly delete these videos and intimidate people. Any post about the lack of water, lines for water trucks, or deaths caused by unsanitary conditions can now become grounds for a criminal case. Local authors are accused of discrediting the authorities or even of extremism. People who are simply trying to tell the truth risk facing real prison sentences. The authorities have effectively imposed an information blockade. Only talk about the successes of restoration and the work of public utilities is allowed. Everything else is forbidden. And when water disappears from the taps, official channels only report temporary inconveniences and technical work. In this way, silence has become part of the system. Not only water, but also the truth is now in short supply. People are left alone with the problem, and even talking about thirst can become dangerous. It's impossible to hide the lines at the water trucks, the trash on the streets, and the foul-smelling water from the taps. Everyone can see it. This is no longer just a household problem, it's an environmental disaster in the heart of a major industrial region. If the situation doesn't change, the number of deaths will multiply by winter. An offensive for the sake of water. That's what's happening. Now it's officially known that 109 people have died due to the water crisis. That's exactly why the Russian army is rushing its offensive in Donetsk region. Because of the water, the enemy army is rushing to capture the Siverskyi Donets, because if they don't, Donetsk won't survive the winter and will turn into a desert. This is no longer just a war for territory. It's a struggle for the physical survival of the occupied cities, because ordinary life has become nothing but a memory. The water catastrophe in Donbas is not just a consequence of the war. It grew out of years of corruption and indifference when officials embezzled budgets under the guise of reconstruction, while cities were left without water. Infrastructure was falling apart, pumps weren't working, but on paper everything looked stable. Donetsk was once called the city of roses in Ukraine, clean, green, and full of fountains. Today it is a city of thirst and fear. People search for water in puddles and reservoirs. The roses remain only in old photographs. While Moscow showcases so-called reconstruction, Donbas is slowly dying. And if nothing changes, those roses will never return. But as international law states, everything that happens in the occupied territories is the responsibility of the occupiers. That is, the terrorist state of Russia, which has brought the occupied territories to an ecological and humanitarian catastrophe, forcing people to drink water collected from puddles, to receive rusty and foul-smelling water from their taps, and to pay unspeakably high sums for it. There's a lot to think about here, a lot to analyze, and of course I look forward to your thoughts in the comments below this video. In the meantime, please subscribe, give a like, and I'll see you in the next broadcasts. My name is Anastasiia Husarieva. Please take care of yourselves and wash your hands with soap. Bye-bye, everyone.